Albie Sachs doesn't need much introduction, but let me give a basic one. He's a lawyer, activist, and writer, and I thought hard about what order that should be written in. As a lawyer, we of course know he was appointed as a founder member of our Constitutional Court and played an important role in the first years of crucial precedent-setting rulings and procedures by that court. But of course, his roots as an activist go back to the 1950s and the Congress movement, a period during which he was detained for some time before going into exile, carried on his activism in exile in the ANC. He returned to the country in the early 90s to take part and to play a role in working on the new constitution, and then, of course, taking his seat on that first constitution. He's the author of many books. Let me just highlight three of the best known: The Jail Diary of Albie Sachs, The Soft Vengeance of a Freedom Fighter, and The Strange Alchemy of Life and Law. Albie, a very big welcome to you. Let me hand over to you to make a few opening remarks. Albie, the floor is yours.
This is quite a moment for me. Is this a loudspeaker or just a recording? It's a loudspeaker, yeah. I don't often speak about my Jewishness, but tonight, in a way, that's what it's about. And I grew up in a very secular home. My parents fought for their right to be secular. I fought for my right in a very pious, believing world to be secular. And the only time I've even looked at the Torah, it was called the Old Testament when I was in prison. It was the only book I had. And I found actually it was filled with spiting and a lot of anger and beautiful Song of Songs, Solomon period, and wonderful prophets. And if I found any historical identification, it's with the prophets, the mad ones. I've never been a Zionist. I have members of my family have gone to Israel. That's their choice, their business. I don't particularly like the idea of a religious state, whether it's a Lutheran state, a Buddhist state, Islamic state, or Jewish state. But I acknowledge that that's a choice that a number of people have made, and that's important to them. In the year 2001, I went to what, I can't even give it a name. If you give it a name, you're taking a position. So I call it that part of the world. I've been invited by the Kennedy School of Government to take part in Gaza in a conference, a workshop on the rule of law. And those were quite promising days. The two-state solution seemed to be coming closer. And I was willing emotionally to go to Israel, travel through Israel, to Ramallah, down through Israel again to Gaza. It was a wonderful conference, a lively, spirited conference with intense debate and argument. And I said, that's the foundation of disputation and a constitution one day. I get a message at the end of the third day that Yasser Arafat would like to meet me. So we go through the checkpoints, Israel, checkpoint, Ramallah, And there's Yasser Arafat, looking just like Yasser Arafat, with his stubble and his scarf, and he comes up to me and says, "This man is a hero." And he kisses me with his stubble on both my cheeks. The next morning, I'm in Jerusalem, sitting on the Jerusalem Supreme Court bench next to Aaron Barak. And I didn't hide from either where I'd been. And I felt only a South African can have that experience. I'm not a Zionist. I've never been a Zionist. I don't identify with Zionism at all. But I understand why, for many people I know, and people with whom I have good relationships, and I have for many, many years, it has great meaning for them. At the same time, as a former freedom fighter, I would say as a Jew, I identify very strongly with the cause of the Palestinians. Denied their nationhood, denied their freedom, treated with disrespect. And I'm feeling, gosh, I'm in a very unusual position, and maybe one day I can be an intermediary. Maybe that's the role that I've got, given my particular origins. From the Plaza number 2 experience, that role becomes increasingly unhappy, even looking kind of futile. And I'm feeling such anguish, and I think almost everybody in this room has felt that anguish to a greater or lesser extent. And it's horrible what's happening as a human being, and for me as a Jew. And part of it, the anguish I feel, is that I feel Jewishness is being attacked by the gross, to call it very mildly, inhospitality, the indifference, the cruelty of what's happening in the name of protecting Jews and Judaism. And I'm proud to be a Jew. I don't want to have to even question my Jewishness. And I'm finding, can I afford to be, can I bear to be a Jew? And being a Jew is an important part of me, a very fundamental part of me, associated with freedom, the struggle for freedom, with fighting injustice, associated with humanity, with empathy, with love, with feeling, with universalism, associated with romanticism, madness, imagination, associated with Karl Marx, who wanted to change the world, with Albert Einstein, who wanted to change the universe, and with Sigmund Freud, who wanted to change our inner selves. All of these things coming together, and then they're being challenged, and I'm told to deny that, to deny my humanity in the name of my connection with Judaism. I'm feeling ravaged. It's not just so ugly what is happening, I feel personally subverted and trampled upon and being denied every aspect of me that I admire. That's the first part. The second part is, I think through this organization perhaps, a couple, an Arab couple living in Israel, visit Vanessa and myself at our home in Clifton. I don't even remember their names. And the man, husband, says to me, "What do I think of the following proposition? One homeland, two states." I like it. I like it. I feel this is going somewhere. One homeland which you share as an ideal, as an emotion, as an aspiration, as a kind of historical thing. And two states And I think, but you've got to go further. There've got to be two strong states with shared interests in ending the war, in recuperating humanity, shared interests in the Holy Lands, shared interests in a certain Semitic history, and shared interests in science, in tourism, in AI, whatever it might be. And then the realization comes to me, and I've always felt this, the only meaningful protection for Israel is a strong Palestine. A strong Palestine. And what has defeated the two-state solution so far is the idea of an impotent, weakened Palestine with a knee in the neck. And that will never work, because that's not a real Palestine. And strong Palestine must give to Palestinians the same sense of dignity and personality and pride that many Jews get from being in a Jewish state. And once that's achieved, that will be a real lasting protection for Israel. And it's the only one that could work. And I find something inside me now is loosening up, because I remember where we were in South Africa. It seemed hopeless, it impossible. We take it for granted now. It seemed absolutely impossible, but we had a vision. Our vision was in the Freedom Charter. It seemed totally remote and unrealistic and impossible. Can South Africans ever live together as equals in one country? And we achieved it. And one of the ways we achieved it was on our side in the liberation movement. We didn't look at the whites as a simple hegemonic bloc. It became important to distinguish the different currents amongst the whites, and it became important to give the whites who had power, who could destroy everything, an idea that there can be a future for you, acknowledging the rights of the overwhelming majority of the people. And that affected our strategy in many ways. And I found that was having a very worrying effect on me in terms of how do I now connect up with Zionists who they either blame Netanyahu for everything in Gaza or don't take in their hearts a full acceptance of the horror that's happening there. They're good people, they're generous people, they warm people, they've been in struggles. And I realize it's important to keep connections with them, because there's going to have to be a huge change in Israel to accept one day, a strong, proud Palestinian state, and to understand that's the only future, guaranteed future, as well as a prosperous and an enabling and a humanizing future for Israel. So my anguish remains as a human being at the horrors happening in Gaza, at the intransigence, at the impunity of what's happening. But suddenly I have a vision. I have an idea of a future not only that could work. The more I think about it, the more I realize it can work, it must work, it must work because it is the only solution. And it has the effect then of enabling me to identify with Palestinians who are fighting for their dignity and freedom, with my heart, my passion, my conscience, but also to keep liaison with Israelis, to help prepare the way for that day when Israel would accept a strong and proud Palestine. And I just want to conclude saying this. I mentioned this vision at a conference I attended, it was last year at Lake Bled, a workshop in Slovenia. And there was a group of Palestinians there. They were just walking around with so much pain and agony and not beating their breasts, happy that they had a place where they could meet. They rushed up to me afterwards and they hugged me. They rushed up to me I felt it reached something inside them that was valid. I personally would favor a single state, equal rights for everybody, like South Africa. That's what I would love. But what I would love is not the issue, is what I think is feasible and possible. And so I asked Anton if I would have an opportunity to communicate and convey these ideas. And I'd like to say thank you, Anton. I can't see you now. I assume you're there. I assume you're hearing me. For giving me this opportunity. I've spoken a little longer than you anticipated, but for me, that story of the movement, if you like, in my heart, my journey, is a story that I think is worth sharing.
Thank you very much, Albie. And it's been a great, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you speak to us. I have some questions for you, but I'll wait and let Elana speak first. And then we'll engage in discussion. Elana Sztokman is an award-winning feminist thought leader, author, educator, speaker, consultant, podcaster, and activist, whose research and ideas in writing are built around shaping a vision for a compassionate society. She writes and speaks around the world about issues of gender, culture, politics, business, religion, and society. The founder of Jewish Feminist Academy and Lioness Books and Media, where she works to amplify voices of women, non-binary, and other marginalized groups, and create platforms for shifting power relationships in society and culture. Her books include In My Jewish State, When Rabbis Abuse, Conversations with My Body, Essays on My Life as a Jewish Woman. Elana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anton, and thank you, Albie, for that really interesting talk. And thank you to all of you for being here and engaging in this really important conversation. I have a different trajectory than my predecessor, than Albie. Are you leaving? Oh, sorry. I have a different trajectory, a different background, vastly different. And yet I think that we're in very similar places right now, which I find interesting. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, not the sort of hipster Brooklyn, but the Orthodox Jewish Brooklyn. I learned in the same yeshiva as Meir Kahana and as Baruch Goldstein. Meir Kahana, of course, is the guru of Ben Gvir. And I always say, if you want to understand Ben Gvir, you have to go back to Brooklyn. You have to understand where that religious Zionism comes from. I grew up very heavily religious Zionism. I bought into it all, hook, line, and sinker. I'm one of the people that Albie, I think, has sort of come around to try to understand how could people buy into all of that. I bought into it for a long time. When I was in school, we had classes in Zionism. Those were the years that Bibi Netanyahu was the Israeli ambassador to the UN. So we grew up idolizing Netanyahu, mostly for his ability to speak. He was doing back then in the 80s what he does now, which is all of that spinning, all of those debate tactics, all of that rhetoric to try to give backing to a particular set of policies. As a teenager, it's hard to talk back to all of that, especially when you're surrounded by an entire culture where that is everything, where the religious Zionism gives you identity, it gives you meaning, it gives you purpose, it gives you connection to history, it gives you community. And thanks to people like Netanyahu, it gives you all of this language that works as sort of tools, almost weapons sometimes. Today, actually, I would say most definitely weapons, language and rhetoric as weapons to justify certain actions, which today we are seeing the absolute worst of. Today, we are seeing the lowest of the low of where, justified words to justify actions, where those actions could lead us. Because all of this didn't start on October 7th. All of this was happening for sort of decades. Only right now we're living through the absolute worst that we have experienced in this since Israel was established in terms of our own morality, where we as Jews have decided to go. So I'd like to explain a little bit about how I went from yeshiva girl, religious Zionist yeshiva girl, where I made Aliyah when I was 23 years old. I had my hat and my skirt and my 4-month-old baby and husband. I did all that. I was gung-ho. I was all rah-rah Israel. I was all, this is the future of the Jewish people. This is the most important, meaningful thing that we could do with our lives. To little by little unraveling it all. It took some time. I moved to Israel in 1993, so it's been 30 plus years of a process where I learned to talk back to my culture, to ask the difficult questions, and to ask the questions that I knew that if I started paying attention to the answers of, that I knew that would start unraveling my entire identity, which it has to a certain extent. I still live in Israel. I have 4 children, 3 of whom are married and have children of their own. And everybody in my family, serves in the army and supports Israel. And my son and 2 sons-in-law are currently in the reserves, and they're doing that while I'm out there protesting the war. I spend a lot of time protesting the war. I go to a lot of protests, and I have a podcast. My podcast is called Women Ending War. I have a Palestinian co-host, and every week we interview different women, mostly women, from all sides of the divide who are fighting all this with their bodies and souls. So, I do a lot of writing and a lot of fighting to try to get this to be different, to undo, or to at least stop what we're doing in Gaza right now and also in the West Bank, and to create a different reality. It is very challenging, as Albie pointed out, many, many challenges. And it's to a certain extent, things seem to be getting worse every day. Every day we're bombarded with new news items about how terrible this situation is, whether it's what the Israeli army is doing in Gaza, what the Israeli government is doing to justify it, to break down democratic processes, what we're doing in the West Bank with arrests and closures. I mean, just yesterday or 2 days ago, Bibi announced the closure of the Allenby crossing, which effectively means Palestinians in the West Bank have no way to leave. They have no way to leave, can't come into Israel, and the Allenby crossing is the only way for Palestinians to leave the West Bank in order to get out of the country. So it's a trap. It's like the government is trying to turn the West Bank into Gaza, and there are deaths, there are killings all the time. It's close to 100 people on average are killed in Gaza every day. Many of them children, many of them people, trying to get food. We're seeing the worst. It's just, we're completely, and the government doesn't even hide its intentions to basically Judaize all of Gaza, and now to Judaize the West Bank, and to turn the West Bank into another trap. So all of this is happening, and it really seems to be getting worse, even though the pressure mounts against the government every day. More and more countries are sanctioning Israel or refusing to do business with Israel. There's more and more protests all around the world. There are arrest warrants for members of the government, including Netanyahu. Today, we heard the news that Netanyahu had to change his flight plan to New York so that he wouldn't fly over Europe because he's afraid of the arrest warrants there. And if there was going to be an emergency landing, he might actually be arrested for war crimes. So, things are getting worse, and yet the Netanyahu government seems to be impervious to all of this. And, you could look back, I can look back 50 years and understand that for 50 years, Netanyahu has been practicing this, has been practicing the rhetorical game to justify his actual policy actions. And it works. Trump does the same thing, by the way. It's all of the rhetoric that bounces around in order to get people to, to sort of say, oh, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, that's fine. They're like cut from the same cloth. Trump and Netanyahu, the ones using the language to justify all this. So all of that is happening, and I'm sure I'm not, sharing anything new with you. But the question is, as Albie was asking, what now? So, in my work with women, I do a lot of, work in different groups of Palestinian and Israeli women. I belong to a group called the Forum 1325, which promotes solutions using women's expertise, focusing on women's expertise. 1325 refers to the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which promotes women's leadership and participation in all aspects of decision-making around peace and security. Also, it promotes a gendered lens on issues of security, how we define security, how we define needs, how we define communal needs, and all of that. So Forum 1325 is a diverse group of Palestinian and Israeli women leaders who have been talking about this for, a long time. And basically, Forum 1325 promotes 4 solutions. In other words, not to say that one solution is the solution, but there are at least 4 solutions that can be achieved through diplomacy. One is the 2-state solution, which has now been adopted by the UN, thanks to, the leadership of Macron and others, and the 147 countries who have accepted Palestine, who have declared they back Palestine as a state. So this whole process that we've been witnessing this past week goes along with the 2-state solution. So that's what's in the front lines, right, in the front right now. But there are other solutions also. There's the binational state that also Albie referenced, and there are other variations. There's something called a confederation and a federation, which are different kinds of loosely connected entities. A confederation, the difference between a confederation and federation can loosely be thought of as the difference between the 50 states of America and the EU. Right, where you have a whole bunch of different entities and they have different variations of how connected they are, how strict the boundaries are, the borders are between them. And there are different organizations in Israel and Palestine promoting all these different solutions. A Land for All is a really important organization, one of the leaders in calling for a confederation, which is basically a 2-state solution with loose borders. And an organization called Challenge is one of the leaders in calling for a federation, which is similar, but with slightly different rules. Now, why are these so important? Why is it so important to understand that these solutions are out there? Because the 2-state solution is kind of old. I mean, with all due respect to Macron, and of course, this is a great thing that he led, and all the things that are happening now are very important. But the 2-state solution is no longer really relevant. And the reason why, there are a lot of reasons why it's no longer relevant. It's been, variations of the 2-state solution have been around for about 30 years. But the idea of drawing these sort of strict boundaries and then creating all kinds of 2 states and border control and all of that is not really that helpful to a lot of the problems that have led to the situation we're in today. So, for example, having a 2-state solution with strict boundaries means that there are going to be certain sites that only one group has access to. That could be mosques or synagogues or archaeological sites, or it could be something like the beach. So, for example, today in the West Bank, most Palestinians can't really get to the beach. There are organizations actually that sort of illegally take Palestinians who live in Hebron and bring these kids to the beach through checkpoints without telling them that, that what their actual status is. I did this. I volunteered for this once, where I brought these kids from Hebron through the checkpoints, an hour drive to the beach. And these kids had never seen the beach before. They live an hour. They live 30 kilometers away from me. My family, we go to the beach all the time. And yet these Palestinians who live literally like less than an hour away from me don't go to the beach because they can't. So, because Israel doesn't let them, right? Because these borders don't let them. So a two-state solution is problematic because everybody wants access to everything, because this land that we're talking about has meaning in so many different ways to so many different people. And trying to parse that out into little dots here and there, and this bit of the map here and there, and this bit of the map doesn't really work. So that's one big issue. Another big issue has to do with, this concept of from the river to the sea. So we hear this all the time, from the river to the sea, from the river to the sea. Both Israelis and Palestinians tend to think of this land as belonging to them. One of the really interesting things is that Israelis and Palestinians wear the same necklace, which is a necklace of a map of Israel. I have Israeli friends who wear this around their neck to show their Zionism, and I have Palestinians who wear this to show their commitment, their Palestinian identity. They wear the same map, the same map. Actually, there's a slight difference. One has the Golan Heights in it and one doesn't, but effectively it's the same map. So how do you draw a line down that? How do you do that? Especially when everybody on all sides is screaming from the river to the sea, from the river to the sea. So that's why we need better solutions than a two-state solution, either a confederation kind of solution or a binational state. I'm a big supporter of, I really believe in what A Land for All is doing, and I think that they have really worked very hard on resolving a lot of these issues. I highly recommend looking them up. Part of me, though, just like Albie said, part of me really prefers the binational state. And the reason why I prefer the binational state is because it's really the most elegant. It is the most simple and the most elegant and the most just, frankly. In this river from the sea, we have around 13 million people, approximately 50% Palestinian and 50% Israeli, if we include, the 2 million Gazans and 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank. Roughly, that's how it works out. So, it just seems to me that long term, what we really need is a state where everybody who's here counts. Everybody who's connected to this land matters. Their rights matter. Their dreams matter. Their desire to live normally matters. Their security matters. Their justice matters. Their desire to go to the beach matters. Their desire to celebrate their holidays in their place of worship with their family and friends. It matters. We all want the same things after all. That's pretty much what we all want. We all just want a normal life where we can get together with our friends and family and celebrate our holidays and speak our language and go to the beach if that's what calls to us that particular day. We all want the same thing. And so the binational state really answers that. It answers that deep need for all of us to be just human, normal humans. And the solution is one in which we would be living the way the people of South Africa live, as we're all just sort of people to get to that place. I understand Albie's reservation that it sort of feels like far off, but I don't think that the dream is far off. I think that if you speak to most Palestinians today, not most, actually, I shouldn't say most. I really do not have data to back that statement up. I know that I personally speak anecdotally to a lot of Palestinians who feel like this is, the only solution. Now, what are the obstacles really to that solution? So there are a few obstacles. The main one is that we have to redefine what we mean by a Jewish state. Because by definition, if we create a state where it's 50% Jewish and 50% Palestinian, then it's not going to be that demographically Jewish in terms of the Jewish minority. And so in order to get to this, we, the Jewish people, have to let go of that idea. We have to actively let go of that whole conversation about demographics. We have to stop fighting about demographics and stop fighting to make sure that we have a Jewish majority no matter what, because that is at the root of so much of the evil that we are doing today. So much of what Israel is doing to Palestinians in the West Bank and Palestinians in Gaza has to do with Israel's desire to erase the people living there as people who deserve rights. We create this, military, whatever it is that we're doing over there. It's non-sovereign. We're creating 3 million people in West Bank and 2 million people in Gaza who have no rights. They have no state. They have no autonomy. They have nobody protecting them. They have no legal system protecting them. And Israel thinks it's okay. The Ben Gvirs who leading the country think it's okay because it preserves that demographic thing. So if we want to be just with ourselves, if we want to hang on to our humanity, we have to let go of the idea of a Jewish majority as the definition of a Jewish state. We have to choose. We have to choose. Either we're going to be the Jewish majority or we're going to be a just, compassionate people. At this point, we can't do both. Can't do both. What we're seeing now is the result of that very flawed thinking. So what does that mean about Jewish state? Am I here saying, oh my God, no more Jewish state? Well, I think we should redefine what we mean by Jewish state. Instead of talking about demography, we should be talking about ethics, all the things that Albie mentioned. We should be talking about what it means to be Jewish. What does it mean to be Jewish? Is it this? Is it this, all the stuff that we're doing in Gaza? Is that really what it means to be Jewish? Or is all the other things, the issues of compassion, empathy, seeing all human beings as human beings? Because if we would take a different definition of Jewish state, instead of talking about Jewish means the Jewish majority, but say, no, Jewish means that we have compassion for all human beings, that all human beings are human beings. And just like what I want for myself in a Jewish state is a place where Jews are safe, where we're safe to practice whatever we practice and celebrate whatever we want to celebrate with the people we love and go to the beach with whoever we want to go to. I want that for myself. And I want it for every single other person who lives on this land. That, to me, is the definition of a Jewish state. It's where I say the things that I want for myself as a Jew, which is safety, security, and joy, the ability to live my life as I want, freedom from oppression. Yes, that's the Jewish dream of 2,000 years. We want freedom from oppression. We want the freedom to live our lives. Yes, that's what it means to be in a Jewish state, that Jews get that, and so does everyone else who lives here. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be redefining what it means to be a Jewish state and hanging on to this definition of what it means to be Jewish. Now, I say this because it's not
Elana,
clear.
Elana, can I ask you to start
Finish
wrapping
up.
up?
Yes, I'm wrapping up.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Sorry for talking so long. Yes.
Is that it, Elana?
No, just one more sentence, okay?
Go ahead.
Yes. I just wanted to say that we need to, if we want a solution, we need to redefine the Jewish state and choose that this is what we want it to mean to be Jewish, because it's not necessarily clear that this is what it means to be Jewish. We have to insist that this is what it means to be Jewish. So we need to let go of demography. We need to redefine what Jewish state means. And most importantly, we need new leadership. And we need leadership that's going to have diversity and especially women's voices. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Elana, I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to ask Albie a question, then I'm going to open it to the floor. But since time is tight, I'm going to ask that both questions and answers be short. Elana, one obstacle that comes to my mind in terms of achieving what you're talking about is overcoming fear. I certainly know that among many Israelis, there is a deep fear of the idea of one state. I can't speak for whether there's a similar fear on the Palestinian side, but there are obvious concerns arising from the events of the last 2 years. How does one overcome that fear and give people the confidence that they can live together?
Fear is something we're socialized into. We're taught fear. Fear is, our leaders tell us who we're supposed to be fearing. But the bottom line is right now, what is the greatest danger to the state of Israel? Bibi Netanyahu. Bibi Netanyahu is causing more death, more instability, worldwide instability for the Jewish people, causing a rise in anti-Semitism. Jews have never been this unsafe since 1945, and it's because of his policy decisions. So we need to understand what we should be afraid of. And what we should be afraid of is this government and where it's leading us. So we need language. Again, I always come back to this, that it's about the language behind our belief systems and our ideas. And we have to learn how to challenge what certain leaders are telling us about who we should be afraid of. Okay, because fear is taught and fear is a socialization. And it's a choice what we choose to be afraid of.
Thank you very much. A very concise and forceful answer. Albie, if I can ask you a question. Albie, you spoke about what role you felt you as a South African and the experience you've been through could play. But let me ask you about South Africa's current and potential role, because there's been a debate about the role South Africa is playing and the role it might play as a mediating force in that conflict. Could I ask you to address that question?
Well, you have asked me, and I will answer. In 2001, I mentioned, it seemed I'm not going to look at you, Don, I'm going to look at my real live audience here. What is called the two-state solution seemed very much on the cards. And South Africa was gearing up to play a very big role. And the two most prominent persons involved in that would be Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu. And they were both physically, personally preparing themselves. Then came Sharon's visit and Intifada, and it all became impossible. But the idea was we did it in South Africa when it seemed impossible, and we've linked certain things, experiences, ways of doing things, ways of enlarging visions that we feel are transferable. And it meant somebody like Desmond Tutu, very attuned to the history of Jewish people who've been persecuted over the ages, very knowledgeable, as he said, as how many Jews supported freedom struggles in different parts of the world, and seeing these as points of connection that he could link up with. And Nelson Mandela, the same thing. He had studied the Afrikaners in his 27 years in jail, through the guards and the others. And he was thinking of ways and means of connecting and enabling the people who are now oppressing him to discover their own humanity and understanding that they needed some kind of assurance that there is a life, there is a future for them. So it's not something new. What's new now is to a certain extent that Cyril Ramaphosa, who was very, very active in our negotiations in South Africa, and he was extraordinary. He was way ahead of any of us, very strategic, and a great sense of how to deal with diverse people, finding points of connection, when to push, when to hold back, timing, all of these different things came in. Potentially, the possibilities of South Africa playing a particularly big role are there. And it's also part of the project is that we have not a large, but a strong Jewish community in South Africa who are very involved in the whole project, very concerned, and hopefully would support a solution that brought peace to the area in the way that they've seen peace came to South Africa. Not equality, not justice as much as we want, but certainly peace here. So I could see potentially an important role. This is like a hot potato area. The rage at the moment is so great on all sides that the idea of equanimity of fair dealing, of calm, of listening to the others, seeing the other side very, very far away. But what does give me hope is we are dreamers in South Africa, and we had a big dream, and the dream was we could live together in one country. And we, in that sense, believe in dreams. We believe in possible vision. And this, if I might mention, where I would love to be in, I would visit the country that you mentioned happily. I can't go to Israel now. I can't. My heart won't let me go there now. Even to meet people like yourself there now. I just feel so alienated from what's happening. I could go to the country that you envisage with that redefined vision of Judaism. But I feel to get there, you do it step by step, step by step. And what needs to be redefined is the nature, the character of the two-state solution, not the state that you mentioned, with a proud, strong, powerful Israel on the one side and a formal, nominal state on the other. When enough Israelis come to the realization that their future as Israelis living in a Jewish state can only be guaranteed by having as their neighbors, their brothers and sisters right next door to them, a strong, powerful, proud Palestinian state, then the future could be golden for both sides. So that means reconfiguring the nature of the two states. And along that process will be what you want. People don't give up easily on national ideals. And the Palestinians want their damn state. They want to have something that's been divide them. They want an existence that's not dependent on others. And I feel they're entitled to get that same joy and sense of meaning and personality and pride from their own state, which they call a Palestinian state, our state as Palestinians, but a state that is now working together with, through shared interests, an Israeli state that has a similar meaning for Jews. I just feel it's more feasible, it's more achievable, and I'm basing that not on any superior knowledge or intelligence I have. I'm basing that on the experience we had in South Africa of once we got the vision right, then your strategy follows that vision, and then you start working towards finding the points of contact, and you find the most surprising people on the other side suddenly realize that they've been barking up the wrong tree. There is another way, and the other way is completely reconfiguring the idea of having a Jewish state next to a strong Palestinian state. My only contribution to what the Arab Israeli said to me was one homeland, two states, is it's got to be a strong Palestinian state, a proud Palestinian state that gives that sense of meaning and significance. And that state then will want to be a good friend, a good neighbor, a good brother and sister to the Israeli state. And well, that's my feeling. I hesitate to advise people who are living there what they should do, but I can speak now as a South African, as a Jew, with my heart, to propose that kind of vision. And it gives me possibilities now to keep in touch with Jews who really drive me crazy that they're defending the indefensible. But one day, those very people have got to be the ones who've got to be the movers for the change. You march in the streets, you protest against the attacks on the judiciary. You've got to go further than that. You've got to start envisaging a powerful Palestinian neighbor who is your friend, who's sharing interests with you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a question from the floor here, and then take one from Cape Town. I'm going to ask the questioner to come here so that the people in Cape Town can see you as well.
Hi there, I'm Harold Sessman. I'd just like to say 50 years ago, I was a young boy in Israel and remember writing home and saying, I don't understand the world. In South Africa, the apartheid government wanted separate homelands for all the different people. And in Israel, the left people wanted independent homelands, that a Palestinian state. And what Elana says is the most beautiful solution to the state of Israel. But unfortunately, I think it's difficult to make it work. And what has happened when the war started in Gaza, I said we mustn't retaliate, we must remain the victims. Unfortunately, what the government has, the Netanyahu government has unleashed for us in the diaspora is unmitigated anti-Semitism. And I want to say to Albie, in a country like South Africa, where our government is anti-Semitic and we're worried about people would be saying, we look at a situation where the Constitutional Court here, Mr. Sachs, won't discuss Malema saying, kill the Boer. What happens if people start walking around in this country and start saying, kill the Jews? Not, Hitler didn't do a good job. We are so vulnerable now after what happened with this war in Gaza and what Netanyahu has done to us in the diaspora.
Thank you. Thank you, Albie. Would you like to respond to that? And in particular, I would ask you to respond to the statement that the South African government is anti-Semitic. Is that something you would agree with?
Well, if they're anti-Semitic, then they're anti-Albie. And I remember in 96, a group of friends of the Guggenheim Museum came to Cape Town. I met them in the castle, and I was telling them, it's so amazing in South Africa. Everybody thought there'd be a racial war, and we've got peaceful change and transfer of power, and the armies are coming together. And the head of their group said, it's an absolute miracle. It's an absolute miracle. 3 Jews on the Constitutional Court. That was a miracle for her. And we didn't, Arthur and Richard and I, we didn't say we were Jews on the Constitutional Court. We were all Jews. We didn't deny being Jews. It was important for us. And you know, our president, Cyril, is accused by one side of being in the pocket of the Jews and working with the Jews and being too close to the Jews. The government is not anti-Semitic. The government has taken a strong stand against Israel. The government of France has taken a strong stand against Israel. Italy, Spain, you can go through the world now, African countries, that doesn't make them anti-Semitic. And the Constitutional Court has actually ruled in one of the cases that criticism of Israel is not per se anti-Semitic. And it's very unfortunate to make it anti-Semitic because it means all those Jews who are fighting against the policies of the government of Israel are somehow discarded as self-despising Jews. And there's nothing more awful than that, and dictating to Jews how they should be Jews and how they should express themselves. So I don't accept that at all. I do worry at times that tempers could get so high in this country that pro-Palestinian and anti-Palestinian forces maybe could start clashing. And it's to the credit of, you can say both sides if there are sides, that they've tended to avoid that kind of conduct, kind of contact.
Thank you very much. I believe we have a question in Cape Town. Over to you.
Here's the question, Chair.
My name is Martin Bennon, and possibly I might be known by the occasional opinion pieces that I've had published in various newspapers. Another one just gone to the Daily Maverick this morning. A throwaway line. The idea of being in danger from anti-Semitism in South Africa just makes me laugh. I don't think there's any country in the world where Jews are as safe as we are in South Africa. My question is very simple and is directed to Professor Sztokman. It's a one-line question. Professor Sztokman, I want to nail your feet to the floor. I want to hear you say that Section 1 of the 2004 Basic Law must be repealed. I leave it to you to, well, if I quote it from memory, I've written it so many different times, it states that Israel is the land where Jews have the exclusive right to self-determination. I want to hear you say that that section of the basic law must go.
Are you referring to the nation state law? Is that what you're asking me about?
Section 1 of the basic law, I think it's the 2004 legislation, which forms part of the constitutional design of Israel.
Over to you, Elana.
Can you repeat what you're asking me about? The line that
You-
you're asking me? The specific line that you're asking me to say that I think we should repeal? I was having trouble following you. I'm sorry, I was a little cut off, my sound.
We recall from memory, if anybody here has the Daily Maverick, you can find I've quoted in practically every single article I've submitted. Section 1 of the basic law, I think it is the year 2007, says that Israel is the country where Jews have the exclusive right to self-determination.
Yeah. So you're asking me what I think
I'm
about that,
asking-
about what
I'm
I think
asking-
about Israel as what Israel. You know, I have to admit that
Sorry.
I've never had this particular exchange before about this particular
my
law.
question
So I'm not sure
So-
what exclusive means,
Sorry,
because exclusive,
if I
right?
if I can
Exclusive,
come in here, Elana, he's
Yeah.
asking you to reject that line, as I understand it, to clearly state a rejection of that line.
yeah. That in other
It
words,
is
that
it is the definition of Zionism, which has been written into the fragmentary basis of the Israeli constitution. It's been written into one of its components, which is the basic law. I think the year is 2004.
Question.
2018. I beg
I think that I answered that question when I was describing my ideal solution.
Dr.
I think that my
Dr.
ideal solution here is that Israel redefines what it means to be a Jewish state, and what it means to be exclusive. I mean, I want to say that I haven't studied this. I'm not a political scientist, right? I'm an anthropologist and an educator, and I deal with communication and language. So, I'm less of an expert on specifics of, laws and legal language, but I would say from an anthropological, sociological perspective, what I'm describing here is most definitely not the Jews control the country, boom, as the ideal, but rather as the country being a country of everybody who lives here. Yes, what I'm describing is sociological and cultural. So the legal discussion, I leave for someone else.
Thank you very much, Elana. I think you made that clear in your talk. I have a question here for our two speakers.
Are there any women questioners?
Yeah,
Are there
I
any
do.
women in the audience who want to ask a
Go
question?
ahead.
Cool. Thank you so much for your words, Albie and Elana. Really appreciate them. I just wanted to ask Elana, as someone who came from a sort of Kahanist background, very religious background,
I
right now
wasn't exactly Kahanist. I didn't grow up as Kahanist. I grew up in a Kahana-friendly setting. I was not a Kahanist. I was religious Zionist.
a
But I
religious
was just,
Zionist.
grew up religious Zionist. But the Kahana world was sort of I write about this in my book, so it's more complicated than that. But the JDL, the Kahana, that world, that culture, were sort of a very clear and dominant presence in my community and in my society. And what I argue is that the extreme Kahanist language filtered into religious Zionism. And so even the mainstream religious Zionist community that for many years wanted to somehow a little bit disassociate from the extremism of Kahanism has trouble doing that because these things are intertwined. So just to clarify, I was never a Kahanist. I was never there. But my argument is that religious Zionism is sort of like a little bit poisoned.
Cool. So I think just following up on that, how, as someone who speaks to everyone on both aisles, it's obviously an incredibly polarized situation at the moment, with people on both sides having extremely extreme views. Based, a lot of them based in religion. How does one even approach someone like that to start a conversation? From your own experience, how could you go to someone on both sides who, don't believe in a coexistence? Where do you even start? How do you even bring up a conversation with them? Thank you.
So obviously these things are complicated, and obviously it takes a lot of work, internal work. You have to do the work in yourself and try to, uproot your own stereotypical ideas and your own indoctrinations before you approach someone who, is from a very different place from you. I mean, that's a good rule for life in general. And, I spent many years studying. Once I started to realize that I was brought up on a lot of things that today I consider, lies and indoctrination. Once I started poking at that, before I, started speaking or writing or declaring anything or even suggesting that I know anything about anything, I spent many years learning. I went on a lot of tours of the West Bank, for example, with lots of different organizations. I listened to speakers. I listened to people who I had never encountered before. I grew up in a place where we knew everything about Palestinians. My teacher would tell us, this is what Palestinians are. This is what they believe. They're all liars and all of that. And none of us had ever met a Palestinian person. We had never read anything that a Palestinian had written. So when I first started to decide to talk back to my culture, I had to first meet human beings and listen and go around and really listen and go places that I'd never been before with an open heart and an open mind. And I spent many years doing that. I spent a lot of years doing that before I opened my mouth. So, I recommend listening. I recommend going to places and listening before you talk and learning, opening yourself up to people you didn't know.
Thank
That's-
you. Thank you. Thank you
Are
very
there-
much. Let's take
there
a
any-
question from Cape Town, please.
Can I ask if there are any women out there who want to ask questions? Because so far we've
Sorry,
only had
Elana, you've
questions
been
from men.
muted. Sorry, Elana, did you want to add something?
No, I just wanted to ask if there were any women who had questions, because so far we've only had questions from men. So I'm glad to see, yes, I'm glad to see some women are stepping up. Yes.
Okay, we'll work on the next couple.
Okay.
Cape Town, any questions?
Mute.
We can't hear you.
Steps do you
Sorry.
think in particular can you think that can help you recreate the new Israel that you suggested, where everyone is living in peace? Because as we all know, in apartheid, like I think you're very familiar with this, where it was a complex situation where even after the voting and stuff, there was still racism and everything like that. And even today, we're still seeing signs of apartheid. How do you think we can still fix that, and how do you think we can still create that equality in Israel today? For you, Elana, I'm very curious about that.
Yes. Hi. So first of all, I do want to say that I agree with what Albie said about, first of all, that things have to happen in stages and that these things are complicated and that at a certain point you have to be realistic. I would add, however, that the first thing that really has to happen is that people in Israel have to learn to think differently about Palestinians, because because Albie was referring to, when Israelis get to finally understand how important this is. Well, how are Israelis going to come to that understanding? Certainly not with his leadership, which is, poisoning all the time, poisoning with hate and fear, and dehumanizing the other nonstop, also through the media. So how are Israelis supposed to formulate a different concept about who Palestinians are and what they are, and about how are Israelis supposed to formulate the idea that Palestinians are human beings? Okay, because there's so much dehumanization that we're so far from that. We are so far from Israelis even understanding that Palestinians have rights and they deserve to live. Okay, so before we even get to anything legal and any of the, the diplomacy, what we need to do is really work on social understandings, media, social understandings. This is why, for me, my podcast is so important, because I'm working really hard to change attitudes, to get people to understand that Palestinians are human beings with equal rights and feelings. Okay, and to undo all of this indoctrination about how, Palestinians lie and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that has to be the first step, but we can't get to that step unless we have a different government. So really the pre-step to the first step is change the government. Change the government, change the rules, and get people in leadership who are changing the way Israelis think about the other. That is the most important first step. After that, you talk about the solutions and the actual solutions. And Albie may be right. Maybe you're right that, I also really understood what Albie was saying about how Palestinians really, really want a state of their own. I hear that all the time from my Palestinian friends, even now, that this week when there was a declaration of Palestinians that I'm hearing, again, I don't want to speak for anybody, I'm just relaying what I hear, which is that, wow, there's an excitement at the idea of a Palestinian state. Even though it has no form, it has no definition, it has no boundaries, it has nothing real to it. It's just like words. So it's like conflicting, because on the one hand, yay, on the other hand, like, okay, what does it even mean? But I do fully understand what Albie was saying, that maybe, the whole idea of having a state is an important first step, so that, there's this presence of the thing, the existence of the thing. I totally get that. But for me, again, speaking as an anthropologist and an educator, for me, the social consciousness has to come first, or at least concurrent. It has to happen at the same time, because that dehumanization is so deep, and October 7th did nothing to help that, for sure. And coming out of all that is really work. It needs work, it needs a plan, it needs a strategy, it needs a communication strategy. So that's where I am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I have another question here.
I've got two questions to ask. One, I would like to ask Elana if she knows. I hear the way that I hear the yearning for a humanist process or solution towards understanding one another, living next to each other, and respecting one another. And that I think that you believe in a dialogue from bottom up in order to conscientize people. So my question to you is whether you know what schools are doing at the moment. What is the main discourse in the schools? And I wanted to ask another question.
Should we answer that first, just quickly?
I hope I'm going to express it well. I want to ask Albie, in Israel, there is a very fragmented opposition to the current government. But according to the polls, the expected candidate that could possibly lead a new coalition without the extreme right-wing messianic groups is Naftali Bennett. And Naftali Bennett speaks about a two-state solution in which he defines equality in all respects except that the Palestinian state cannot have an army. And secondly, it cannot be the protector of the borders. So my question to you, because when I heard it, the first thing I thought is that's a similar conception to the Bantustans, although maybe not exactly. Then I was thinking, is it possible, that's my question, is it possible that that could be the start of living together? Although it's not a fair and equal partition, but could it lead to something more democratic in time?
Thank you.
Should I answer the first question? Should I address the first question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so in terms of organizations, I highly recommend following an organization called ALMEP, the Alliance for Middle East Peace. ALMEP is a constellation of 180 organizations that are dedicated to shared society, finding solutions, partnership, dialogue from both sides, binational organizations and Palestinian organizations and Israeli organizations. ALMEP actually is one of the strongest forces that has been working with Macron to get to this point, and ALMEP representatives were in the UN this week. ALMEP is the organization that led the June Paris conference. I don't know if you all followed this, but I was there also, and in Paris there were 500 representatives from civil society organizations like the ones you're looking for, all kinds, education and media and diplomacy, and all kinds of organizations and rights organizations and legal organizations that were there to advise the French government on all of this grassroots work, all of this grassroots, education and dialogue and all of those things. So I highly recommend following ALMEP, especially looking up their updates about what has been going on this past week, what was going on in June, what's been going on since June, where there were all of these working papers. In Paris, we had 8 working groups that put together a whole series of proposals, grassroots, ground-up proposals that we then presented to the UN, to the delegates of the UN. We sat there, the delegates of the UN were on this big screen, and we were giving them all of these proposals. I mean, 2 days later, the whole thing was canceled because of the Iran attacks, but they came back together now in September. It was supposed to happen in June. It happened now. So these grassroots organizations are having a real impact. So I highly recommend looking at ALMEP. And I also highly recommend following an organization called Standing Together. Standing Together is also a grassroots organization, Israeli Palestinians, that their whole mission is shared society. And standing together is a big part of the grassroots, change that's happening now, where people are starting to see the possibility of living together. And it's Israelis and Palestinians together, or Palestinian citizens of Israel, and it's remarkable. Highly recommend follow them. And just to address, even though you didn't ask me, you asked Albie, but about Naftali Bennett and, where is the hope for the future when Naftali Bennett is the alternative to Bibi, which is, a question that keeps me up at night, believe me. But my hope and dream is that the organization like Standing Together will create a political party, because we need a real alternative. And right now in the political landscape in Israel, there is no alternative. There really is nobody in the landscape of potential prime ministers. The 5 people who are potential prime ministers are all pretty much generals. We don't really have alternative thinkers except for Yair Lapid. Okay, so we need an alternative leadership for sure. And I think there are leaders in the grassroots. How do we get from grassroots to formal leadership? That is the $64,000 question. Okay, but that's the question. They're there. My point is that the leaders are there, the actors are there, the work is happening. We just have to figure out a way to get it to sort of, be explosive on the leadership level.
Thank you very much. We can only take a couple more questions, and
Question.
sorry, Albie, do you want to address that question?
The second question.
Please go ahead.
Yes, anything that stops the bombing, the starving, the disrespect, the inhumanity is a step forward. It's just so horrible. Any step that starts acknowledging the personhood of Palestinians is a step forward. Any step that involves listening to Palestinians and talking. It's not we should be asked, could Palestinians accept as a way forward that they don't have an army? They should be asked if, as a step forward, you would accept that you don't have an army. But we will live in peace, we will work together, We will educate together. We will share things together. We will atone. There really has to be a kind of atonement for horrible things that have happened in the name of the state of Israel. It changes the whole game. And so it's not with an attitude of, as long as you know we're keeping you in your place, as long as we can keep our knee on your neck, then we will stop doing the things that we're doing. Then it won't work. So for me, that's the vital thing. Anything to limit the current horror, anything to start establishing relationships of respect and dignity and listening with Palestinians would be a huge step forward.
Thank you very much. As I was saying, we can only take 2 more quick questions. And since we have indications in Cape Town, we're going to take them from there. Let's have the first one.
Mine is more a question to us rather than to our speakers. But I want to dream with our speakers. But the dream must also be based in practicalities. How are we going to get there? And that's an answer for all of us. And I think we as South Africans are particularly well placed to give that answer. I come from a Jewish background. My family in the late 80s were voting for the Nationalist Party. Just imagine that. Perhaps I should begin going backwards a little bit. If only Netanyahu was the only problem, we could all celebrate. The problem is that he represents a large majority of Jewish Israelis. And that's where we come in and the lessons for us. Because in the late 80s, my family, almost incomprehensibly to me at least, were now voting for the Nationalist Party. And they were doing so not because they were fearful of anti-Semitism, but they were fearful of what the blacks were going to do to the whites. And therefore, it's how did they then change so quickly that the referendum, whenever it was, they voted overwhelmingly in favor of a peaceful transition? How did we get there? And in my view, at least, that was because of boycott, disinvestment, and sanctions. Pressure to bear on the ordinary citizens, the white citizens of South Africa, who were tired of being the pariahs and wanted all the rest of it. And I think that's something we ought to now, at a practical level, small though it is, we ought to be forcing our government to do at least 3 very simple things, which would be consistent to bring pressure to bear on those Jewish Israelis who were the equivalent of my family voting for the Nationalist Party. And that is, just very briefly, and in no particular order, we still have formal diplomatic relations with Israel. They've been suspended. That needs to be
Can I
extended.
ask you to give your 3 points quickly so that we can wrap this up? It seems more like a statement than a question, so I think we need to wrap it up.
Okay, I'm just trying to say what we ought to be doing. The second one is we're the second largest provider of coal to Israel. And the third one is we still don't implement our own laws, which makes it illegal for people, South Africans, to go to foreign countries to fight in foreign countries as mercenaries. These are 3 very practical steps we could take. Thank you. But that's for us.
You. Thank you. I read that as not really a question. So let's take the next question from Cape Town. Then I'll give our 2 speakers a quick chance if they want to make any closing remarks.
Good evening. My name is Mark Churok, and my question is to both the speakers. Why are we not listening to each other and to the facts about the history of our homeland, Israel, that is not a Jewish state? It is a state that is a democratic state that has many faults, but there are 21% non-Jewish people, and there are many Arab countries around, including in 1948, they attacked Israel for its very existence. And I'm asking, why are we not listening to solutions which see the whole land as one land, where the law, the basic law of our land is not consulted with everybody, like the rules of the road are kept simple, and why we cannot look at the first step, which is to have secure regions, for example, 6 regions in the land, plus common property areas which give access, plus the security where all people are part of the defense force around each region to help the formation of a unity which can build towards peace. The notion of 2 states is, I feel, completely out of place, as it would have been in South Africa, to divide South Africa into 2 states. So the question I asked is, why are we not listening to these issues? Okay?
Thank
On
you.
the fact.
Can I answer
Thank
that?
you.
Can I respond to that?
Go ahead.
No, I think what you just described is exactly what I was talking about when I was describing confederations and federation solutions. What I said is that, you know, the Forum 1325, with a coalition of women leaders looking for solutions from Palestinians and Israeli sides, talk about 4 potential solutions, not just the 2-state solution. We have the 2-state solution, the binational solution, confederations and federations. I talked about the what you just described is basically a confederation, which is pretty much what A Land for All is proposing. So I would say follow A Land for All. It's wrong what you're saying that nobody's talking about this. It's not true that nobody's talking about this. People are talking about this. There are lots of people working very hard on this. So pay attention. Follow A Land for All. Follow Challenge. Follow Avram Berg. Avram Berg also has an organization, political party, also promoting a confederation kind of, I forgot what it's called, a land citizen of all its citizens. Kol Ezracheha is his political party. Okay, so follow the right people and you won't be saying that nobody's doing this. Lots of people are doing this.
Albie?
Anton, I'd rather use the little time available to me to respond more globally. Indirectly, it will be an answer to the question asked.
Sorry, I didn't hear you there.
Rather than answer to the question put to me about why, I'd rather use my time to give a little wrap up at the end. To be quite candid, I think of the Padma Neruda poem. Why don't your poems speak about the leaves and volcanoes of your native land? Come and see the blood in the streets. Come and see the blood in the streets. Come and see the blood in the streets. It's so horrible what's happening now. It's so overwhelming that going back into the whole history and so on, for me, is not what we need now. We need an end to that fighting, and we need the beginning of a vision. And should I just carry on and wrap up?
Yes.
For me, there are 2 big things that are needed. The one is to shift the debate, the passion, the intensity from the question of existence. For the one to live, the other must die. For Israel to live, Palestine must die, must starve, must vanish. For Palestine to live, Israel must be destroyed. That's endless war. And it's got to, once one shifts away from that paradigm and self-replicating stasis, you can start thinking of, is there another way that would work? And when I speak about the two-state solution, it's not the two states that Elana has been speaking about, which is horrible and the opposite of what I'm speaking about. It's two proud, independent, real states. And what I'm imagining now is there will be powerful forces in Israel would say that is the way to go, and the powerful forces in the military, in the security, that we can survive better that way than endless war, 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 war. And big tech, we can make more money. We can make more money if we're not fixated simply on this issue of survival and destroying the people who are trying to destroy us. And also that ambivalence, I find amongst Jews, amongst all human beings, ambivalence. Part of us is decent and good and warm, and part of us gets hijacked or panicky, or is just almost like picking up from our parents certain kinds of hatreds. And that brings me to my second point. It's the difference between rage and anger. And for me, that's absolutely vital. Anger is a very powerful and a very positive force. You don't stand by at injustice. You take a stand, but it's a thoughtful stand. And the stand means looking into the eyes of the other and finding ways and means being fruitful and productive. Rage is you are hurting so much. The only way you can get rid of the rage is to exterminate the source of the hurt. That's existential, and that's never ending. So we need to move away from rage. For the one to live, the other must die, to another whole way of taking things. What comes first? The Albie view of the two grand, large dreams, if you like, working out in practice, or the stealing into people's hearts and enabling people to grow and develop in the way. Of course, I love what you're saying, Elana, and I support. I don't want to sound condescending, patronizing. That's me. That's me. I'm a pastoral in that sense, a pastoral. I could have been a rabbi if I'd only been religious. I could have been a rabbi. So it's not really the one comes and then the other follows. You change the hearts and then you can get a solution. Or you get a solution, then you change. The two go side by side. The vision is very important. It's something you can work towards. At the same time, you carry on with neighbors, with friends, with your children, in schools, outside schools, in shul, outside shul. You carry on all the time. So I'm actually encouraged and heartened by the discussion. I love the way you are in the beast of the belly, if you like, working at the coalface or lab against coal now because of the carbon that's involved. We need all of these things. It's not a choice. But I do feel that broader vision that offers a future for two peoples, however they're configured and however they interrelate, that each can feel, yes, I can live there, I can survive there, I can flourish there. I think that's absolutely vital. And so I'm not dissuaded from anything I've said. If I've dissuaded at least one person in this audience, it's me. And thank you for giving me the chance to persuade myself that I'm actually onto something that's got a viability, and I'm not going to let go of it.
Thank you, Albie.
My turn?
Albie, I described you in the beginning as a lawyer, an activist, and a writer. Next time I'll add an aspirant rabbi. Elana, would you like to say a few brief closing words?
Yes. I just want to say that I agree, I would say, with almost everything you said. I feel like we have much in common in terms of understands about what the ultimate vision is and what the complexities are, and also what it means to build alliances. And so I deeply respect everything you said just now. And I'm really grateful to have had this opportunity to get to know you and to speak to this community and hear from the community. So thank you for that. The last one word that I would want to end with is just to sort of add on to what Elvie said, is I would also add the word hope. Hope, just like you were saying, let go of the anger so that you can find your basically optimism or hope. I mean, I think that that's for me is what's the missing piece here, or not missing, it's just maybe an undercurrent. Because, you know, when all of these things are happening, it is very easy to fall into the fear and the hatred and the aggression, you know, and and once you're in that place of fear, you know, it's hard to see other things. And it takes work. It takes a choice. Hope is a choice. You have to choose to believe that there's a different possibility out there. So I would just encourage everybody to believe in hope, to hang on to hope. If you want sources of hope, I just, shameless self-promotion, I'm just going to tell you, my podcast, I interview women all the time who leave me with hope. Each woman who I interview has a different story of the work that she's doing. And we end the podcast almost every time by saying, what brings you hope? And at the end of the day, what brings us hope is meeting all of these people who are doing this work. There are lots of people doing amazing things. And so we just have to keep building those connections and strengthening those connections and amplifying the voices and just keep hanging on to that belief. It's really hard. Some days it's really, really hard in the climate that we're living in. But that's what I would want to leave you with. Just hang on to the hope. And thank you, really, thank you again for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And I really, this kind of setting really is like petrol for my soul. So thank you.
Thank you. Hang on to the hope is a good way to end the evening, I think. A big thanks to both our speakers, who both brought hope to the discussion, very importantly. And a big thanks to those who came here and in Cape Town. And let me say that if you haven't subscribed to our newsletter and want to follow these discussions, please go to our website or leave us your details tonight and make sure you get our newsletter, which will tell you about future events of this and other sorts. And finally, a thank you to our hosts here at the Holocaust and Genocide Center for their generosity in allowing us to be here tonight. Thank you very much to everyone. And to the Joburgers, please join us in a cup of coffee or tea and a biscuit. I'm sure Cape Town can offer something similar. Good night.